The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Nora Caldwell held it between her fingers, the paper thin as a whisper, the ink black as a threat. 30 days. The words blurred at the edges of her vision, but the number remained sharp. 30 days to pay, what she owed or the land her land, Thomas's land, the only thing left of him besides Lily, would belong to the bank. She stood on the porch of the farmhouse, the wood beneath her boots worn smooth by 2 winters of widowhood. The wind came down from the mountains carrying the scent of pine and the promise of early snow. October in Silver Creek was a held breath the moment before the world turned white and silent. Inside, Lily was singing, 6 years old, and she still believed in songs. Nora folded the letter once, twice, 3 times until it was small enough to fit in her apron pocket, small enough to pretend it didn't exist. She looked out at the land that stretched before her, 40 acres of grass and stone, a barn that leaned slightly to the left, a fence line that needed mending. Thomas had died for this land, crushed beneath 1,000 pounds of rock in a mine that promised silver and delivered only graves. What he'd left her was debt. The door creaked open behind her. Martha Hayes emerged, her gray hair twisted into its usual knot, her eyes sharp despite her 68 years. She'd come by with bread as she did every Tuesday, but Nora knew it was more than charity. Martha had a way of appearing when things were about to break. "You got the letter," Martha said, not a question. Nora didn't turn around. 30 days. "Samuel Barrett's getting bold." "Samuel Barrett owns half this town." Nora's voice was flat. "He'll own the other half soon enough." Martha moved to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. The older woman smelled of flower and lavender, of things that stayed when everything else left. "There's other ways. I've thought of them all." Nora finally looked at her. "Every man in Silver Creek over 50 has made it clear they'd be happy to help me keep this land. For a price." "Not every man." Something in Martha's tone made Nora pause. The wind picked up, rattling the loose board on the porch railing. Inside, Lily's song shifted to something softer, a lullaby Nora had sung to her when she was small enough to hold. "What do you mean?" Martha was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the mountains. The peaks were already white, catching the late afternoon sun. "There's a man came to town about 6 months back. Declan Walsh. Works wood like he was born with a chisel in his hand." "I don't need a carpenter, Martha. You need a husband." The word hung between them, sharp and sudden. Nora felt her chest tighten. "I had a husband." "You need one the town will accept. Someone who will give Lily a father and name, keep the gossips quiet, and let you keep your land." Martha's voice was gentle but firm. "Someone who won't ask questions you don't want to answer." Nora turned to face her fully now. "And this Declan Walsh, is that someone, a stranger who appeared 6 months ago with no history, no family, no reason to be here?" "Exactly." Martha's eyes met hers, steady and knowing. "A man with something to hide is a man who won't judge you for doing the same." The words settled into Nora like snow into earth. She thought of the debt ledger hidden in her bedroom, the one that showed just how much Thomas had lost to cards and whiskey in the months before he died. The one that proved her late husband had been planning to abandon them to run to California and leave his debts behind. She'd found it a year after his funeral, tucked into the spine of his Bible. Some secrets were meant to stay buried. "Why would he agree?" Nora asked quietly. Martha smiled, sad and small. "Because, dear girl, some people are running towards something, and some are running away." Declan Walsh first saw her 3 days later. He was repairing the roof of Martha's general store, the sun warm on his shoulders despite the October chill. The work was good, simple, honest, requiring nothing but his hands and his attention. He'd been drifting for 6 months, taking odd jobs, sleeping in barns or under stars, trying to put enough distance between himself and Boston that the memories couldn't follow. They followed anyway. Eleanor's face in the firelight, the way the flames had consumed everything, the curtains, the walls, his sister's chance at life. The doctor said the smoke got her first, that she didn't suffer. Declan didn't believe them. He'd been 3 states away when it happened, attending a business dinner. His father had insisted on discussing a marriage to a woman whose name he could barely remember now. By the time he got home, there was nothing left but ash and the smell of guilt. He heard the voices before he saw them. Female voices, one older and steady, one younger and strained. He paused, hammer in hand, and looked down from the roof. Martha was standing with a woman Declan had seen around town but never spoken to. Nora Caldwell. Widow, mother. The words followed her like shadows. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and a dress that had been mended at the seams more than once. She held herself with a kind of careful stillness, as if moving too quickly might shatter something. He's a good man, Martha was saying. Quiet, keeps to himself. But he's skilled and he's honest. Martha, I can't. You can. And you will because you don't have another choice. The older woman's voice was kind but unyielding. Talk to him at least. What's the harm in that? Nora looked up, then as if sensing his presence, and their eyes met. Hers were gray, the color of winter storms, and in them he saw something he recognized. Not grief, he'd seen plenty of that in mirrors, but the exhaustion that came after it. The weariness of carrying a weight too heavy to name. She looked away first. I should get back, Nora said. Lily will be waiting. Think about it, Martha pressed. Please. Nora nodded in a quick, tight gesture and turned to leave. Declan watched her walk away, her stride purposeful, despite the slump of her shoulders. A small girl with blonde braids was waiting by a wagon, swinging her legs and humming. When she saw her mother, her face lit up, and Nora's expression softened in a way that made something in Declan's chest ache. Martha looked up at him, then shading her eyes against the sun. You can come down now, she's gone. Declan climbed down the ladder, his boots hitting the dirt with a soft thud. He set the hammer down and crossed his arms, waiting. Nora Caldwell needs help, Martha said without preamble, and you need a reason to stay put for a while. I'm not looking to stay. Everyone's looking for something. Martha's gaze was steady. She needs a husband. You need, well, whatever it is you're running from. I figure you could help each other. Declan felt the old anger rise quick and hot. You don't know anything about me. I know you showed up here 6 months ago with nothing but the clothes on your back and a look in your eyes like you'd walk through fire. Martha's voice was soft now, almost tender. I know you work hard, keep your head down, and never stay in one place longer than a few weeks. I know you're a good man, trying very hard to believe he isn't. The words hit harder than he wanted to admit. Declan looked away toward the mountains. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Eleanor had loved sunsets. She used to make him stop whatever he was doing and watch them with her hand in his, her voice bright with wonder. He'd give anything to see one more sunset with her. What makes you think I'd agree to this? He asked finally. Because you're tired. Martha's voice was gentle. And so is she. And sometimes the kindest thing two tired people can do is rest together. He came to her farm that night. Nora was putting Lily to bed when she heard the knock. It was soft, hesitant, as if the person on the other side wasn't sure they wanted an answer. She tucked the quilt around her daughter's small form, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and made her way to the door. Declan Walsh stood on her porch hat in his hands. He was taller than she'd realized, broad-shouldered, in the way of men who worked with their bodies. His hair was dark touched with gray at the temples, and his eyes were blue, the kind of blue that reminded her of deep water, of things hidden beneath the surface. His face was lined not with age, but with something heavier. Experience, maybe. Or regret. Mrs. Caldwell, he said. His voice was low, rough around the edges. Martha suggested I come by. Nora stepped aside, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Come in. He hesitated, then crossed the threshold. The house was small, a main room that served as kitchen and parlor, both 2 bedrooms barely big enough for their beds, and a loft where Thomas used to store supplies before the supplies ran out. It was clean at least. Nora made sure of that. Poverty she could live with, shame she could not. Declan stood awkwardly in the center of the room, still holding his hat. Nora gestured to the table. Sit. He did. She busied herself making coffee, needing something to do with her hands. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but waited. Finally, she set 2 cups on the table and sat across from him. Martha told you, she said, not a question. Some. He wrapped his hands round the cup but didn't drink. Said you needed help keeping your land, that the bank's closing in. 30 days. The words tasted bitter. Samuel Barrett made it clear he'd give me more time if I agreed to certain terms. Declan's jaw tightened. What kind of terms? The kind that end with me in his bed and him with my land. Nora met his eyes, refusing to look away. If they were going to do this, he needed to know who she was. I've had 3 proposals since Thomas died. 2 from men old enough to be my father, 1 from Barrett. None of them were interested in me, just the 40 acres and a ready-made family. And what are you interested in? The question surprised her. Most men wouldn't have asked. Keeping a roof over my daughter's head. Making sure she grows up knowing she's worth more than the land she stands on. Declan nodded slowly. He took a sip of coffee, then set the cup down with deliberate care. Martha said you might be willing to make an arrangement. A marriage, Nora said bluntly. On paper. For the town, for the bank, for Lily. But nothing more than that. Nothing more. You'd have a place to stay. Work if you want it. The barn needs repairs, the fence is falling apart and winter's coming. I can't pay much, but I can feed you and give you somewhere to sleep that isn't under the stars. And in return, you'd be my husband, in name. You'd help me keep this land, give Lily a father to point to when the other children ask why she doesn't have one. Nora's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. She hid them in her lap. You wouldn't owe me anything beyond that. And when the time comes that you want to leave, we'd figure out how to end it quietly. Declan was quiet for a long moment. He looked around the room at the worn furniture, the patched curtains, the small wooden horse sitting on the shelf that Lily must have played with earlier. His expression was unreadable. Why me? He asked finally. Nora had asked herself the same question. Because you're a stranger. Because you don't have roots here, and neither do I, not really. Because I think we both understand what it's like to need a place to hide. His eyes snapped to hers, sharp and wary. I'm not hiding. Neither am I, she lied. They looked at each other across the scarred wood of the table, two people pretending to be whole. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. In her bedroom, Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something too soft to hear. The barn, Declan said finally. I'd sleep there. Yes. And we'd keep this arrangement between us. Yes. No one would know it's not real. No one, Nora confirmed. As far as Silver Creek is concerned, we'd be a normal family. Man, wife, child. Declan ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking exhausted. I don't know the first thing about being a husband or a father. Good, Nora said. Neither do I. We'll both be pretending. Something that might have been a smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. It didn't last. When would we do this? As soon as possible. The bank's clock is ticking. And after, when the debt's paid and you don't need me anymore. Nora hadn't let herself think that far ahead. We figure it out. Together. The word hung in the air between them. Together. As if such a thing were possible. As if two people could build something real from something fake. Declan stood, placing his hat back on his head. For a moment, Nora thought he was going to refuse, going to walk out into the night and leave her to face Samuel Barrett and his 30-day deadline alone. But he paused at the door, his hand on the frame. I'll need a few days, he said, to think about it. Of course. He nodded, opened the door, and stepped out into the darkness. Nora watched him go, his figure disappearing into the shadows beyond the porch light. She stood there for a long time after he was gone, listening to the wind and the distant howl of a coyote, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the only choice she had left. 3 days passed. Nora went about her routines with mechanical precision. She woke before dawn, milked the cow, fed the chickens, made breakfast for Lily. She mended clothes that didn't need mending and scrubbed floors that were already clean. Anything to keep her hands busy, her mind occupied. Lily asked about the man who'd come to visit. Is he a friend, Mama? Maybe, Nora said, because she didn't know how to explain the truth. Maybe he will be. He seems sad. Nora looked at her daughter, surprised. What makes you say that? Lily shrugged, her small shoulders rising and falling. His eyes. They look like yours do sometimes, when you think I'm not watching. The observation hit Nora like a physical blow. 6 years old and already too perceptive for her own good. She knelt down, bringing herself to Lily's level, and brushed a strand of blonde hair from her daughter's face. Everyone gets sad sometimes, sweetheart. It doesn't mean they're bad. I know. Lily's voice was solemn, far too serious for a child. It just means they're remembering. That night, Samuel Barrett came by. Nora saw his carriage approaching from the porch, the lantern swinging with each bump in the road. Her stomach tightened. She sent Lily to her room with instructions to stay there no matter what she heard. Barrett was a large man, not fat but substantial, with silver hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd been handsome once, Nora supposed, but years of soft living had rounded his edges. He wore his wealth like armor, tailored suits, polished boots, a gold watch chain that caught the light. Mrs. Caldwell. He touched his hat brim, a gesture of politeness that felt like mockery. Lovely evening. Mr. Barrett. Nora didn't invite him in. What brings you here? Just wanted to check in, see how you were managing with the deadline approaching. He clasped his hands behind his back, rocking slightly on his heels. 3 weeks left if my count is correct. Your count is correct. I wanted to reiterate my offer. You marry me and the debt disappears. Simple as that. His voice was calm, reasonable. I'd be good to the girl. Give her a proper education, a proper home. You'd want for nothing. Except my freedom. Barrett's smile tightened. Freedom's overrated when you're freezing and starving, Mrs. Caldwell. Winter's coming. Can you honestly say you'll make it through on stubborn pride alone? Before Nora could answer, a voice came from the darkness beyond the porch light. She won't be alone. Declan Walsh stepped into the light and Nora's breath caught. He looked different than he had 3 nights ago, cleaned up, dressed in what must have been his best clothes, his hair combed back. But it was the expression on his face that stopped her. Determined. Protective. Decided. Barrett's eyes narrowed. And who might you be? Declan Walsh. He moved to stand beside Nora, not touching her, but close enough that the message was clear. Mrs. Caldwell's fiancé. The word dropped like a stone into still water. Nora kept her face carefully neutral, but her heart was hammering. He'd come back. He'd chosen this. Barrett's pleasant expression cracked just slightly. Fiancé, how convenient. I don't recall hearing about any courtship. We've been discreet. Declan's voice was level, giving nothing away. But we'll be married before the month is out. Any debt she has, I'll be taking on as my own. Is that so? Barrett looked between them, his gaze sharp and calculating. And what exactly is a carpenter planning to do about $700 in debt? I'll find a way. You'll fail. Barrett's voice hardened. And when you do, I'll be waiting. He tipped his hat to Nora, a gesture that felt like a threat, and climbed back into his carriage. They watched him drive away, neither of them moving until the sound of hooves faded into the night. Nora turned to Declan. $700. I heard. I didn't know you were coming. Neither did I. He looked at her then, and she saw the fear behind his eyes, carefully hidden but still there. Until I did. Why? Declan was quiet for a long moment. The wind moved through the grass, carrying the scent of distant snow. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I'm tired of running, and maybe for a little while I could run towards something instead. Nora felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of a knot she hadn't realized was there. She held out her hand. Then we do this for real. He looked at her hand, then at her face. Slowly, carefully, he took it. His palm was rough with calluses, warm against her skin. For real, he agreed, or close enough. They were married 4 days later in Martha's parlor. It was a small affair, just Nora, Declan, Lily, Martha, and the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through. Nora wore her best dress, a simple gray wool that had been her mother's. Declan wore the same clothes he'd worn the night he'd faced down Samuel Barrett, his hands clean, his expression solemn. Lily stood between them, holding both their hands, her face bright with a joy that made Nora's throat tight. Her daughter believed this was real. Believed that the sad man with the blue eyes was going to be her father, that they would be a family, that things would be better now. Nora wished she could believe it too. The preacher's words washed over her in a blur. Love, honor, cherish till death do us part. Empty promises made by two people who'd agreed to nothing more than mutual survival. But when Declan slipped the plain gold band onto her finger where it had come from, she didn't know his hands were steady. You may kiss the bride, the preacher said. They looked at each other, caught off guard. This hadn't been part of the plan. But Martha was watching, and Lily was watching, and the preacher was waiting with an expectant smile. Declan leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. But Nora didn't move. His lips brushed hers, soft and brief, barely more than a whisper of contact. It lasted less than a second, but in that moment Nora felt the weight of every lie they were about to live. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark, unreadable. Congratulations, Martha said, her voice warm with genuine happiness. You're married now. They signed the papers. The preacher blessed them. Martha served cake that tasted like dust in Nora's mouth. Through it all, Declan stayed close, playing his part perfectly, a hand on the small of her back, a nod when spoken to the careful performance of a man in love. When it was over, they rode back to the farm in the wagon, Lily, between them chattering about how pretty the ceremony had been, how nice it was to have a papa now. Declan listened, his expression soft in a way Nora hadn't seen before. You're good with her, Nora said quietly when Lily had finally exhausted herself and dozed off against Declan's shoulder. He glanced down at the sleeping child, then back at the road. She makes it easy. Still, thank you. For what? For not treating this like a transaction. Nora kept her eyes forward, watching the mountains grow larger as they approached the farm. For being kind to her. She's been through enough. So have you. The words were simple, but they hit something deep. Nora blinked against the sudden sting in her eyes. We all have, I think. They fell into silence after that, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the soft snore of Lily between them. When they reached the farm, the sun was setting, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. Declan carried Lily inside while Nora unhitched the horse, and by the time she came in, he'd already put the child to bed, boots off quilt, tucked around her small frame. They stood in the doorway of Lily's room watching her sleep. In the dim light, she looked even younger, her face peaceful in a way it rarely was during the day. Nora felt the familiar ache in her chest, the fierce protectiveness that had sustained her through 2 years of widowhood and poverty and shame. "I'll get my things from town tomorrow," Declan said quietly. "Move them to the barn. There's a stove out there, it works mostly, and blankets. I'll be fine." They moved back into the main room, suddenly awkward now that the performance was over. Declan picked up his hat from where he'd left it on the table. Nora wrapped her arms around herself, not sure what to say, how to end this strange day. They both started at the same time then stopped. "Go ahead," Nora said. "I should let you rest." Declan turned the hat in his hands. "It's been a long day." "Yes." She walked him to the door, opened it. The night air was cold sharp with the promise of frost. "Declan," he paused on the threshold. "Yeah, thank you for choosing this, for choosing us." Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "Thank you for letting me." He walked toward the barn, and Nora watched until he disappeared inside a lantern, flaring to life in the window a moment later. She closed the door, leaned against it, and let herself breathe. She was married. Again. To a stranger, in an arrangement built on desperation and secrets. And yet, for the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel quite so alone. The first week of their arrangement passed in careful choreography. Declan worked from dawn until dusk, repairing the fence line, reinforcing the barn chopping wood for winter. He moved with quiet efficiency, never asking for direction, simply seeing what needed to be done and doing it. Nora watched him from the kitchen window, surprised by how much he accomplished, how he seemed to anticipate the farm's needs before she could voice them. They ate dinner together, her Declan and Lily, but the conversations were stilted, surface level. The weather, the work, what Lily had learned in her lessons that day. They were polite strangers sharing a table, nothing more. At night, Declan retreated to the barn. Nora would see the lantern light burning late, and she wondered what he did out there in the cold. Whether he was working or reading or simply sitting with his thoughts the way she sat with hers. Lily at least seemed happy. She followed Declan around the farm like a shadow, asking endless questions that he answered with surprising patience. He showed her how to hammer a nail straight, how to measure lumber, how to tell if a board was rotten or sound. And when she grew bored with carpentry, he carved her small animals from scraps of wood, a rabbit, a bird, a horse. "He's nice," Lily said one night as Nora tucked her in. "I like him." "I'm glad, sweetheart." "Do you like him?" Nora paused, caught off guard. Yes, he's a good man. But do you like him the way Daddy liked you?" The question stung in ways Nora couldn't explain. Thomas had liked her once, she supposed. Before the drinking, before the gambling, before the resentment set in like rot. Before she'd become just another burden he was trying to shed. "It's different," Nora said finally. "With grown-ups, sometimes liking someone takes time." Lily considered this, her small face serious. "Tommy's mama and papa share a room. And Mr. Patterson at the store, he kisses his wife goodbye every morning. Do you think Mr. Declan will kiss you goodbye?" "I don't know, honey, maybe." "I hope so," Lily said, yawning. "It's nice when people kiss. It means they're not sad anymore." Nora pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead, her throat tight. "Go to sleep, sweetheart." But Lily's words stayed with her as she cleaned up the kitchen, as she prepared for bed, as she lay in the darkness listening to the wind rattle the windows. It's nice when people kiss. It means they're not sad anymore. If only it were that simple. On the 8th day, Samuel Barrett came again. This time, he didn't bother with pleasantries. He arrived mid-morning when Declan was working in the far field and Nora was hanging laundry. He stood by his carriage, arms crossed, watching her with the expression of a man who'd caught someone in a lie. "Mrs. Walsh," he said, emphasizing the new name. "Or should I still call you Mrs. Caldwell?" Nora finished, pinning a sheet to the line before turning to face him. "Barrett, what do you want?" "Just checking on my investment." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Making sure your new husband is as capable as he claims." "He is." "Really?" Barrett stepped closer and Nora fought the urge to step back. "Because I did some asking around. Turns out nobody in Silver Creek knows a damn thing about Declan Walsh. Not where he came from, not why he's here, not even if that's his real name. A man's entitled to his privacy. A man's entitled to suspicion when he shows up out of nowhere and marries a woman in debt." Barrett's voice hardened. "I know a con when I see one, Nora. and this marriage smells like one. Then prove it. Oh, I will. He turned to go, then paused. One more thing. I sent a telegram to Boston, to the Walsh family there, asked if they knew a Declan about 30 years old, dark hair, blue eyes. Haven't heard back yet, but I will. And when I do, if this marriage is a sham, I'll have grounds to challenge the debt transfer, which means you'll be right back where you started, only this time with a fraud charge attached. He climbed into his carriage and drove off, leaving Nora standing in the yard, her hands cold despite the sun overhead. She didn't see Declan approaching until he was beside her, his face tight with something she couldn't read. How much did you hear? She asked. Enough. He looked in the direction Barrett's carriage had gone, his jaw clenched. He's going to dig. And when he does, what is there something I should know? Declan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Walsh isn't my real name. It's my mother's maiden name, the one she used before she married my father. Nora's chest tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to know who I really am. He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw fear. Real, raw fear. My father is Jonathan Blackwell, the industrialist, the one who owns half of Boston and wants to own the other half. The name hit her like a slap. Even in Silver Creek, people had heard of Jonathan Blackwell. Railroads, steel banks, if it built America. Blackwell had a hand in it. You're his son, Nora said slowly. Was his son. Declan's voice was bitter. Until I walked away from it all. The money, the name, the arranged marriage to some woman I'd never met. And when my sister died in a fire that might not have happened if I'd been there, instead of at some goddamn dinner party, I couldn't. His voice broke. I couldn't stay, couldn't pretend to be that man anymore. Nora saw it then, the weight he'd been carrying, the reason for the haunted look in his eyes. Samuel's telegram will come back with a name, Declan Blackwell, not Walsh, and when it does, he'll know. And this whole arrangement falls apart. They stood in silence, the laundry snapping in the wind between them. Nora felt the familiar panic rising, the sense of walls closing in. She'd thought she'd found a way out, but all she'd done was traded one trap for another. What do we do? She asked finally. Declan was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his words were careful, measured. We could run, take Lily and disappear before Barrett gets his answer. I have some money saved. Not much, but enough to get us somewhere new. Montana, maybe. Or Oregon. Run. The word tasted like ash. Just like Thomas wanted to do. Leave our problems behind and hope they don't follow. It's better than losing everything. Is it? Nora looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd chosen to stop running, even if only for a little while. You said you were tired of running, that you wanted to run towards something instead. Was that a lie? No. Then we don't run. She took a breath, steadying herself. We fight together. Nora. No. She cut him off, surprised by the strength in her own voice. I have spent 2 years letting other people tell me what I can and cannot do. Letting shame and fear dictate my choices. I will not run, not from this land, not from this life. And if Samuel Barrett wants a fight, then by God, we'll give him one. Declan stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You realize we'll probably lose? Probably. Nora smiled sharp and determined, but at least we'll lose on our feet. For the first time since she'd met him, Declan Walsh or Blackwell or whoever he really was smiled back. It was small, fleeting, but real. All right then, he said, we fight. Martha found this that evening, sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread between them. Property deeds, debt records, marriage certificates. She took one look at their faces and poured herself a cup of coffee without asking. So, she said, settling into a chair, Samuel's stirring up trouble. You knew, Nora said, not an accusation, just a statement. I suspected. Martha looked at Declan. A man doesn't run that hard unless he's got a damn good reason. And the way you work wood, the education in your voice, you weren't born to poverty, son. Does everyone in this town see through me? Just the ones paying attention. She took a sip of coffee, made a face. Lord girl, this is terrible. Anyway, I'm here to tell you that you're not alone in this. Nora frowned. Martha, hush, I'm talking. The old woman set down her cup with a decisive clink. Samuel Barrett has been a thorn in this town's side for 20 years. He's foreclosed on 6 families that I know of, bought up their land for pennies, and turned around and sold it for profit. He's a vulture, and it's about time someone stood up to him. What are you saying? Declan asked. Martha reached into her bag and pulled out a ledger. She opened it, turned it around so they could see. Lines of numbers, dates, names. Nora's eyes widened as she realized what she was looking at. Is this Barrett's accounts, the ones he keeps off the official books? Martha's smile was grim. Turns out when you own the general store, people talk. And when you've been alive as long as I have, you learn how to listen. Samuel's been doing some creative accounting. Loans that don't exist on paper, interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. If the territorial auditor saw this, he'd have questions. Where did you get this? Nora breathed. Let's just say Samuel's bookkeeper is my nephew, and he's always had a conscience that bothers him at night. Martha closed the ledger. This doesn't solve your immediate problem, but it gives you leverage. And in a fight like this, leverage is everything. Declan leaned back in his chair, something like hope dawning on his face. You'd risk this for us. For Nora, yes. For Lily, absolutely. Martha looked between them, her expression softening. And for you, Declan, because I've seen the way you look at them when you think no one's watching. Whatever brought you here, you're not running anymore. And that's worth fighting for. The words settled into the room like a benediction. Nora felt her throat tighten, emotion welling up that she didn't know how to name. For so long, she'd been alone in this fight, and now she wasn't. Thank you, she managed. Martha waved a hand dismissively. Don't thank me yet. We've still got work to do. Samuel's telegram will come back in a few days a week at most. We need to be ready. Ready how? Declan asked. Well, for starters, you two need to start acting like you actually love each other. Because right now, you look like business partners, not newlyweds. And if Samuel suspects this marriage is a sham, all the leverage in the world won't save you. Nora and Declan looked at each other across the table. The air between them shifted, became charged with something neither of them wanted to name. What do you suggest? Nora asked quietly. Martha's smile turned knowing. I suggest you stop sleeping in the barn, Mr. Walsh, and start remembering what it feels like to let someone in. That night, after Martha left and Lily was asleep, they stood in the doorway between the kitchen and Nora's bedroom. The boundary that neither had crossed since the wedding. You don't have to, Nora said. We could. No, Declan's voice was firm. Martha's right. If we're going to make this work, we have to commit to it. All of it. But not, she gestured vaguely at the bed. I mean, we agreed. I'll sleep on the floor. I just need to be in here in case someone comes snooping. In case Barrett sends someone to watch the house. He paused. Is that all right? Nora nodded, not trusting her voice. They made up a pallet by the window blankets and a thin mattress barely enough for a man Declan's size. He changed into a clean shirt while she turned away, suddenly aware of how intimate this was, how different from the careful distance they'd maintained. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to him settle on the floor. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Can I ask you something? Declan's voice came from the darkness. Yes. Why didn't you take Barrett's offer, the marriage I mean? It would have solved everything, the debt, the farm, Lily's future. Nora was quiet, choosing her words carefully. Because I've already lived in a marriage where I was just a means to an end, where my husband saw me as a burden, not a partner. And I swore when Thomas died that I would never let myself be trapped like that again. I'd rather lose everything and start over than spend the rest of my life in a cage. She heard him shift at the rustle of blankets. That's why you chose me. Because you thought I'd let you be free. Yes. She turned her head, though she could barely see him in the dark. Was I wrong? No. His voice was soft. No, you weren't wrong. More silence. Then, can I ask you something? Fair's fair. Your sister, Eleanor, what was she like? Declan was quiet for so long that Nora thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion barely contained. She was bright, curious about everything, used to drive our tutors crazy with questions. She wanted to be a doctor, which our father said was impossible for a woman of her station. But she studied anyway in secret. She'd sneak medical texts from Father's library and read them by candlelight. She sounds wonderful. She was. A pause. The night she died, I was supposed to be home. But Father needed me at this dinner. This business thing said it was important for appearances, so I went. And while I was there making small talk with people, I didn't care about the house caught fire. They said it started in her room, a candle probably. She was reading one of those medical texts. Declan, if I'd been there, I could have gotten her out. Or maybe I'd have been with her and we'd both have died. I don't know. All I know is that I chose business over family and she paid the price. Nora's chest ached. She understood guilt the way it could eat at you from the inside. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it I chose to go? Your father chose to send you. Eleanor chose to light that candle. The house chose to burn. She took a breath. You can spend your whole life looking for someone to blame, but at the end of it, you're just alone with your anger. Is that what you did with Thomas? I'm trying to. She smiled in the darkness, bitter and small. Some days are easier than others. They fell silent again. But this time it felt different. Lighter somehow. As if by sharing their secrets, they'd laid down weights they'd been carrying too long. Nora, Declan said quietly. Yeah, thank you. For not running. For choosing to fight. Thank you for staying. She heard him settle deeper into his blankets. Outside, an owl called low and mournful. Nora closed her eyes, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel alone in the dark. The first night Declan slept in her room, Nora barely slept at all. She lay awake listening to his breathing from the floor, the unfamiliar sounds of another person sharing her space. It had been 2 years since anyone had slept in this room besides her and Lily, and even then Thomas had spent most nights passed out drunk on the sofa or not coming home at all. This was different. Declan's presence was quiet, unobtrusive, but undeniably there. The room felt smaller somehow, the air between them charged with an awareness she didn't know what to do with. When dawn finally came, she found him already gone, the pallet neatly folded, his blankets stacked in the corner. Through the window, she could see him in the yard chopping wood, his breath visible in the cold morning air. It became their routine. He slept on the floor, she in the bed. They didn't speak much in the darkness, but sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, one of them would break the silence with a question, a memory, a truth they'd been holding too close. Slowly, carefully, they began to know each other. 3 days after Martha's visit, Lily came home from town with a black eye. Nora was kneading braid dough when she heard the wagon approaching faster than usual. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside, her heart already sinking at the sight of Lily's tear-streaked face. What happened? Nora dropped to her knees, gently tilting Lily's chin to examine the bruise blooming purple beneath her eye. Tommy pushed me, Lily said, her voice small and broken. He said you and Mr. Declan aren't really married, that everyone knows it's fake, that we're liars. Nora felt her blood run cold. Who told him that? His papa. He heard it from Mr. Barrett. Lily's lower lip trembled. I tried to tell him it wasn't true, but he wouldn't listen. And when I pushed him back, he hit me. Declan appeared beside them, his face going dark at the sight of Lily's injury. Where is he? This Tommy. Declan? Where? His voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. At the blacksmith's, Lily whispered. His papa is Mr. Crawford. Declan was already moving toward the barn, toward the horses. Nora caught his arm. What are you going to do? What I should have done from the start. He looked at her, and she saw the fury carefully banked behind his eyes. Not hot and reckless, but cold and determined. I'm going to make it clear that anyone who hurts our family answers to me. Our family. The words hit Nora like a physical thing. She let go of his arm and stepped back. Don't make it worse. It can't get much worse. He was already saddling his horse. Barrett's spreading poison. If we don't show strength now, it'll only get harder. He rode off before she could argue, leaving Nora standing in the yard with Lily pressed against her side, the taste of fear sharp in her mouth. Declan found James Crawford at his forge, the clang of hammer on steel ringing through the afternoon air. A boy, 10 years old, maybe 11, stood nearby pumping the bellows, his face sullen and defiant, even as it bore a matching bruise to the one he'd given Lily. Crawford, Declan said, dismounting. The blacksmith looked up, wiped sweat from his brow. He was a big man, thick with muscle from years of hard work, his face weathered and suspicious. Walsh? What brings you by? Your son put his hands on my daughter. Crawford's expression hardened. Your stepdaughter, you mean? And from what I hear, she's not even that. Just the widow's baggage you took on for land rights. Declan felt the old anger rise, the kind that had gotten him into trouble in Boston, the kind that made men do stupid things. He forced it down, kept his voice level. What Lily is to me is none of your business. What is your business is teaching your son that you don't hit girls, ever. Boy was defending himself. She pushed him first. After he called her a liar. After he repeated poison he heard from his father, who heard it from Samuel Barrett. Declan took a step closer. Let me make something very clear, Crawford. I don't care what Barrett's been saying. I don't care what rumors are going around town. Nora is my wife. Lily is my daughter. And anyone who says otherwise, anyone who hurts them, will have me to deal with. Are we understood? Crawford set down his hammer slowly, deliberately. That a threat? It's a promise. For a long moment, they stared at each other, two men measuring threats and possibilities. Then Crawford spat into the dirt at his feet. Fine, I'll talk to the boy. But you better watch yourself, Walsh. Or Blackwell. Or whatever the hell your real name is. Barrett's been asking questions, and people are starting to wonder. Fancy carpenter shows up out of nowhere. Marries a woman in debt. It doesn't smell right. Then maybe people should worry less about how things smell and more about how they are. Declan turned to go, but Crawford's voice stopped him. One more thing. My boy might have been rough, but he wasn't lying. Everyone knows this marriage is convenient. Question is, what happens when it stops being convenient? You planning to stick around, or is this just a stopover on your way to somewhere else? The words hit harder than Declan wanted to admit. He looked at the blacksmith, then at the boy still working the bellows, his face carefully blank. I guess we'll find out, Declan said quietly and left. On the ride back to the farm, Crawford's question echoed in his mind. What happens when it stops being convenient? He didn't have an answer. That evening, Lily wouldn't come out of her room. Nora tried coaxing her with dinner, with promises of dessert with the wooden horse Declan had carved. Nothing worked. The girl lay curled on her bed, facing the wall, silent and small. Let me try, Declan said quietly. Nora hesitated, then nodded. She watched him knock softly on Lily's door, heard him ask permission to enter. After a long moment, a small voice said yes. Nora stayed in the kitchen, but she could hear their voices through the thin walls. Low and gentle Declan's rough baritone mixing with Lily's higher tones. Did you hurt Tommy? Lily asked. No, I talked to his father, made it clear that what he did wasn't acceptable. He said you weren't my real papa. A pause. Do you want me to be, I don't know. Lily's voice was so small. My real papa died, and Mama says he loved me, but I don't really remember. Not really, just pieces. The way he smelled like tobacco, how his voice sounded when he sang. But not him. Not the person. That's okay, memory's tricky that way. Were you there when your papa died? No, he's still alive actually, back in Boston. Then why don't you see him? Declan was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because sometimes, even when people are alive, they're not really there, not in the ways that matter. Like how Mama's here, but sometimes she's sad and far away. Yeah, like that. More silence. Then Mr. Declan. Yeah, sweetheart. If you're not my real papa and you're not staying forever, then what are you? Nora's breath caught. She moved closer to the door, needing to hear his answer. Declan's voice was careful, measured. I'm someone who cares about you and your mama. Someone who wants to make sure you're safe and happy, even if I don't know how long I get to do that. That sounds like what a papa does. Maybe. Or maybe it's just what people do when they care about each other. Tommy said people who care about each other kiss. That's how you know it's real. Nora closed her eyes, heat flooding her face. Of course Lily would bring that up. Sometimes, Declan said slowly, but there's lots of ways to care about someone. Kissing is just one. What are the others? Listening when they're sad, helping when things are hard, staying even when it's easier to leave. A pause. Fighting for them even when you're scared. Are you scared? Yeah, sometimes. Me too, Lily whispered. But maybe it's okay, being scared together. Yeah, Declan said, and Nora heard something in his voice that made her throat tight. Maybe it is. November came with the first real snowfall. It started as a few flakes in the afternoon, gentle and inconsequential. By evening, it had become a curtain of white, the wind howling down from the mountains, piling drifts against the barn and the porch. The temperature dropped so fast that the water in the bucket froze solid. Storm's going to be bad, Declan said, coming in from securing the animals. His shoulders were dusted with snow, his cheeks red from cold. Could last a few days. They spent the evening preparing, bringing in extra firewood, filling pots with snow to melt for water, checking that the windows were sealed tight. Lily watched with wide eyes, unused to the urgency, the sense that they were battening down for something larger than themselves. By nightfall, the storm was a living thing, rattling the house like it wanted in. The wind shrieked through the eaves and snow pressed against the windows so thick they couldn't see more than a few feet beyond the glass. Nora lit the oil lamps and built up the fire in the stove. They ate a simple dinner of soup and bread, the three of them huddled close to the warmth, watching the flames flicker and dance. Tell me a story, Lily said, her voice small in the large sound of the storm. What kind of story? Nora asked. A true one, about when you were little. Nora thought for a moment. When I was your age, my father used to take me ice fishing. We'd walk out onto the frozen lake, drill a hole through the ice, and sit there for hours waiting for something to bite. Did you catch anything? Sometimes. But that wasn't really the point. It was about being quiet together, watching the snow fall, feeling small under a big sky. She smiled, remembering. He used to say that silence was its own kind of language, that if you listened hard enough, you could hear what really mattered. What did you hear? That I wasn't alone, even when it was quiet, even when nothing was happening. I wasn't alone. Declan was watching her across the table, his expression unreadable. What happened to him? Your father. Died when I was 15. Fever took him. After that, it was just me and Mama until she passed a few years later. Nora looked down at her hands. That's when I met Thomas. I was 18 alone working at the general store. He seemed like salvation, someone to not be alone with. And was he, for a while, she met Declan's eyes, until he wasn't. Lily yawned, her head drooping. Nora carried her to bed, tucked her in beneath layers of quilts. When she came back out, Declan had moved to the floor by the stove, feeding it more wood. It's going to be a cold night, he said, even with the fire. Nora sat beside him, not quite touching, but close enough to share warmth. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the fire crackled. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames. Can I tell you something? Declan said finally. Of course. I'm starting to forget her voice. Eleanor's. I can see her face clear as day, the way she laughed, how she'd tilt her head when she was thinking. But her voice, it's fading, and that terrifies me more than anything. Nora didn't say anything for a moment. Then, after Thomas died, I was relieved, and then I felt guilty about being relieved. Like I should mourn him properly the way a widow should. But mostly I was just tired. Tired of the lies, the pretending, the weight of being married to someone who'd stopped seeing me as a person. Is that why you agreed to this another marriage of convenience? Partly. She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. But also because I thought maybe this time I could do it right. Make it be what I wanted it to be instead of what someone else expected. And what do you want it to be? Nora looked at him, then really looked at him. At the way the firelight caught in his eyes, the lines of his face, the careful way he held himself. Like he was always ready to run, but choosing not to. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but I'm starting to think it might be something real. The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Declan held her gaze, and she saw something shift in his expression. Fear, maybe, or hope. Nora. A knock at the door shattered the moment. They both froze. Who would be out in a storm like this? Nora rose, moved to the window, tried to peer through the snow-covered glass. All she could make out was a dark shape on the porch. Declan was already at the door, one hand on the handle, the other reaching for the shotgun they kept by the entrance. Who's there? It's Martha. The voice was muffled by wind but unmistakable. Let me in before I freeze to death. They yanked open the door. Martha practically fell inside, covered head to toe in snow. Her lips blue with cold. Declan caught her, helped her to a chair by the stove while Nora grabbed blankets. What are you doing out in this? Nora demanded, wrapping Martha in layers of wool. Had to warn you. Martha's teeth were chattering. Barrett, he got his telegram back from Boston. Knows who Declan really is. Nora's blood went cold. When, this afternoon, before the storm hit, Martha accepted the cup of hot coffee Declan pressed into her hands. He's planning to go to the territorial judge, file for annulment of your marriage on grounds of fraud, claims Declan misrepresented himself, married you under false pretenses. Can he do that? Declan asked. He'll try, and he's got the judge in his pocket, loaned him money last year that hasn't been paid back. If Barrett pushes hard enough, the judge might rule in his favor, which means the marriage is void, Nora finished, and the debt transfers back to me. Worse than that. Martha set down her cup, her expression grim. He's threatening fraud charges. Says you both knew it was a sham marriage entered into it to cheat the bank. That's a criminal offense. You could face jail time. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the howl of the wind and the crack of burning wood. Nora felt the walls closing in again, the familiar panic of being trapped with no way out. The ledger, Declan said suddenly, the one you showed us, Barrett's illegal accounts. It's leverage, but it's not enough, not on its own. Martha looked between them. You need something more, some way to prove this marriage is real. How do we do that? Nora asked. Everyone knows it started as an arrangement. Then you have to show them it became something more. Martha's voice was gentle but firm. You have to make them believe you're in love. We can't, Nora started, but Martha cut her off. You can, and you will, because the alternative is losing everything. The farm, your freedom, Lily's future, all of it. Martha stayed the night too cold and exhausted to make the journey back to town. They made up a bed for her on the sofa, and she was asleep within minutes, her snores mixing with the sound of the storm. Nora and Declan retreated to their room. The air between them felt different now, charged with Martha's words. You have to make them believe you're in love. We could run, Declan said quietly, settling onto his pallet. Take Lily leave tonight while the storm covers our tracks. To where Barrett will just send the law after us. And besides, Nora sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisted in her lap. I'm tired of running. From the truth, from the past, from what's real. What's real? Declan's voice was careful. What is this Nora really? She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the silence between them felt like a held breath. I don't know, she said finally. I thought I did. Thought this was just survival, a transaction, but then you... She stopped, struggling for words. You've been kind to Lily, patient with me. You stayed when you could have left a dozen times. You fought for us when you had no reason to, and I... Nora, I look forward to seeing you in the morning, she said in a rush. I watch for you through the window when you are working. I sleep better knowing you're here, even just on the floor. And I don't know what that means, but it's not nothing. It's not fake. The words hung in the dark between them. Nora's heart was hammering so loud she was sure he could hear it. It's not nothing for me either, Declan said quietly. But I'm scared. Because everyone I've ever cared about, I've failed. My sister, my mother, everyone. And if I let myself care about you and Lily, really care, and then I fail again, then we fail together. Nora slid off the bed, moved to sit beside him on the pallet. Their shoulders touched, and she felt him tense, then slowly relax. You said it yourself to Lily. Being scared together is better than being scared alone. He turned to look at her, and in the dim light from the window, she could see his face, the conflict written there. If we do this, if we make it real, there's no going back. No more pretending it's just an arrangement. I know, and I can't promise I won't leave. Not because I want to, but because I don't know if I'm capable of staying. I know that too. She reached out, took his hand. His palm was warm, calloused, real. But maybe we stop thinking so far ahead. Maybe we just try for today, for tomorrow, for however long we get. Declan looked down at their joined hands and back at her face. Slowly, carefully, he reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered and Nora felt her breath catch. If I kiss you right now, he said softly, it's not for show, not for Martha or the town, or to prove anything to Barrett. It's because I want to, because every night I lie here in the dark and think about what it would be like, because I'm tired of pretending I don't. Then kiss me, Nora whispered, and stop pretending. He did. It was nothing like the brief performative kiss at their wedding. This was slow, deliberate, full of all the things they'd been holding back. His hand cupped her face and she leaned into it, her own hands finding his shoulders, his neck, the solid reality of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nora felt like something fundamental had shifted, like they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Stay with me, she said, not on the floor here. Declan's eyes searched hers. Nora, just sleep, just be close. She pulled back the blankets, made room. Please. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse, that the fear would win, that he'd retreat back to his careful distance. But then he nodded, pulled off his boots, and climbed into the bed beside her. They lay facing each other in the darkness, the storm raging outside, Martha snoring softly in the other room. Slowly, Nora reached out and took his hand again. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said quietly, we face it together. Together, he agreed. And for the first time since they'd made their arrangement, Nora felt like it might actually be true. The storm blew itself out by morning, leaving the world buried in white. Nora woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Declan's arm around her waist. Sometime in the night, they drifted together, and now she was pressed against his chest, his breath warm against her hair. She should have felt uncomfortable, should have pulled away, remembered their boundaries. Instead, she found herself burrowing closer, savoring the warmth, the sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. You awake? Declan's voice was rough with sleep. Yeah, we should probably... Yeah. But neither of them moved. They stayed there, wrapped in each other, in blankets watching dust motes dance in the morning light. It was Lily's voice that finally broke the spell. Mama, Mr. Declan, come see the snow. They separated quickly like children caught stealing cookies. Nora smoothed her hair while Declan pulled on his boots. But when they stepped out into the main room, Martha was watching them with knowing eyes and a small smile. "Storm's past," she said simply, "but the real one's about to begin." 3 days later, Nora was in the barn when she found it. She was looking for extra rope digging through the old trunk where Declan kept his few possessions. She shouldn't have been snooping, knew it was wrong, but her hand caught on something tucked into the lining, and she pulled it free before she could think better of it. A letter. Old well read, the paper soft from being folded and unfolded countless times. The handwriting was feminine, elegant. "Dearest Dec, I hope this letter finds you, though, and I suspect you don't want to be found. Father's been asking about you again, making threats and promises in equal measure. I've told him what you asked me to, that I don't know where you are, that you made it clear you're not coming back. But I'm writing anyway because you're still my brother, and I refuse to let you disappear completely. I need you to know something. What happened wasn't your fault. You keep carrying that guilt like it's a stone you're meant to bear, but it's not. The fire was an accident. The candle fell. You being at that dinner didn't cause it, me dying." Nora's hands started to shake. "Me dying." She read on, hardly breathing. "Me dying didn't happen because you weren't there. It happened because the house was old and dry and the smoke moved fast. If you'd been home, you might have saved me, or you might have died too. We'll never know. But what I do know is this. You have to stop punishing yourself by refusing to live. You have to let yourself be happy. Let yourself love. Let yourself stay somewhere long enough to build something real. Because, Dec, you're too good a man to spend your life running from ghosts. I love you. I forgive you for not being there, even though there's nothing to forgive. Now you need to forgive yourself. Your sister, Eleanor." The date at the top was 3 years ago, long before Eleanor died, which meant she didn't die in the fire. Nora looked up to find Declan standing in the barn doorway, his face pale. "You lied." "No, yes, it's..." He moved toward her, then stopped as if afraid to come too close. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicated." Nora's voice was sharp, hurt, making her cruel. "You said she died in a fire, that you weren't there, that you could have saved her." "I thought she did." Declan's voice was raw. "For months after I left Boston, I was sure of it. It was the only thing that made sense, the only reason I'd have run. But then Martha, she's the one who got that letter to me. Tracked me down about a year ago, said someone from Boston had sent it care of the general store, hoping it would find me eventually." "So your sister's alive?" "Yes." "And you haven't gone back? Haven't written her? Haven't..." Nora shook her head, trying to understand. "She's alive, and you're here lying about her death, using it as an excuse to run away from responsibility." "It's not like that," Declan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then what's it like?" Nora stood, the letter clutched in her hand. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you built your whole life here on a lie. Made me believe you were running from tragedy when really you're just running from myself." The words exploded out of him. "From the man my father wanted me to be. From the marriage he arranged, the business he built, the life that would have suffocated me. Nora almost died in that fire, Nora. The doctor said she had minutes, that if the staff hadn't found her when they did, she'd be dead. And I wasn't there. I was 3 states away, playing the dutiful son, and my sister almost died. But she didn't. But she could have." He ran his hands through his hair, agitated. "Don't you see? It doesn't matter that she survived. What matters is that when it counted, I chose duty over family. And if I'd gone back after getting this letter, I'd just be making the same choice again. Returning to a life I don't want because it's expected, because it's right, because it's what I'm supposed to do. So instead you stay here with us, building a life on a lie." "It's not a lie." He moved closer, his eyes desperate. "What I said about guilt, about running, about being tired, that's all true. The only thing I lied about was the ending. Eleanor didn't die, but the man I was, he did, and I don't want him back." Nora stared at him, this man she'd married, this stranger she was starting to love. "You have to write to her." "What?" "Your sister. You have to write to her, tell her you're alive and safe, because if you don't, you're not running from your old life, you're just being cruel." Declan looked like he'd been slapped, but slowly he nodded. "You're right. I know you're right. You're scared." Nora's voice softened. "Scared that if you open that door even a crack, you'll get pulled back through. Scared that loving her means giving up what you've built here." "Yes." She stepped closer, put her hand on his chest. "But love isn't a trap, Declan. It's not an either-or. You can love your sister and love She caught herself, the word us dying on her lips. You can love more than one thing at once. He covered her hand with his, held it against his heart. I'm sorry for lying, for making you think. I know. She did. Could see it written all over his face, the guilt and fear and desperate hope. But no more secrets. Not between us. If we're going to make this real, we have to be honest. About everything. Everything, he agreed. They stood there in the dim barn's snow light filtering through cracks in the walls, and Nora felt the last barrier between them crumble. This wasn't an arrangement anymore. Wasn't convenient or careful or safe. This was real, messy and complicated and terrifying, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. That evening, they sat together at the kitchen table and Declan wrote a letter to his sister. It took him 3 drafts, each one crumpled and discarded before he got it right. Nora watched, occasionally offering a word or a phrase, but mostly just being there. Being steady. When it was finished, he read it aloud. Eleanor, I got your letter. Took me longer than it should have to work up the courage to respond. You were right about everything, the running, the guilt, the inability to stay. I've been carrying your death around like a talisman, using it as an excuse not to build a life, not to let anyone close. But something's changed. I met someone, a woman with a daughter struggling to keep her land. I married her, started as an arrangement, a way for both of us to survive. But it's become more than that. She's made me want to stay, to stop running, to try. I can't come back to Boston. Not yet, maybe not ever. The man Father wanted me to be, I killed him, and I'm not sorry, but I want you to know I'm alive. I'm safe, and for the first time in years, I'm trying to be happy. I hope you can forgive me for disappearing, for letting you worry. You deserve better. Your brother, Dec. He folded it carefully, sealed it with wax. I'll send it tomorrow. Good, Nora said. She took his hand, laced their fingers together. That's good. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low until Lily called out from her room that she couldn't sleep. Declan went to her, and Nora listened to him reading some story, his voice low and soothing, and felt something in her chest expand. This was her life now. This man, this child, this farm, imperfect and uncertain, but hers. When Declan came back out, she stood, held out her hand. Come to bed. No hesitation this time. No careful distance. He followed her to their room, and they lay down together, his arm around her waist, her back pressed to his chest. Safe, warm, together. Nora, he murmured into her hair. Yeah, thank you for making me face it, for not letting me keep running. She turned in his arms, looked up at his face in the darkness. Thank you for stopping. He kissed her, then soft and sweet, and Nora felt the last piece of her heart that she'd been holding back fall irrevocably into place. They were in trouble. Barrett was coming for them. The judge was in his pocket, and everything they'd built could crumble with one word from the wrong person. But they'd face it together, and somehow that made all the difference. Samuel Barrett came calling 2 days before the hearing. He arrived in mid-afternoon, his carriage pulling up to the farmhouse like a dark omen. Nora saw him from the window and felt her stomach knot. Beside her, Declan tensed. Stay inside with Lily, he said. No, Nora grabbed her shawl. We faced this together, remember? They stepped out onto the porch side by side. Barrett was already standing in the yard looking up at them with an expression that might have been satisfaction or might have been something more complicated. Mr. and Mrs. Walsh, he said, the emphasis on the names mocking. Or should I say Mr. Blackwell and Mrs. Caldwell? What do you want, Barrett? Declan's voice was cold. Just to offer you one last chance. Barrett clasped his hands behind his back. The hearing's in 2 days. The judge, well, let's just say he owes me several favors. Your marriage will be annulled, your land will go to auction, and you'll both face fraud charges. Unless what? Nora demanded. Barrett's gaze shifted to her, and something flickered in his eyes. Not malice exactly, but something sadder. Unless you tell the truth. Admit this marriage was a sham from the start. Declan walks away clean, and you, Nora, you agree to marry me. I'll pay off the debt, keep the farm and the family, raise Lily as my own. No criminal charges. Everyone gets what they need. Except me, Nora said flatly. I'd get a prison of a different kind. You'd get security, stability, a future for your daughter. At the cost of my soul. Barrett flinched slightly, and for a moment Nora saw past the veneer. Saw a man who was lonely, who was desperate in his own way, who was trying to fill a void with possession because he didn't know any other way. Why, she asked suddenly. Why do you want this so badly? The land, the control. Me, why? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I had a wife once, Margaret. She died giving birth to our daughter, and the baby didn't make it either. 20 years ago this month. The confession hung in the cold air. I see Margaret in you, Barrett continued. The way you hold yourself, the way you fight. And I thought, he stopped, shook his head. It doesn't matter what I thought, I can't bring her back. I know that. But I could have this land, this life, this second chance. Nora felt something twist in her chest, not pity exactly, but understanding. I'm not her, she said gently. And you can't recreate what you lost by forcing something new. I know. Barrett's voice was hollow. But I'm in too deep now to stop. The hearing will go forward, and you'll lose everything. Then we lose, Declan said. He reached for Nora's hand, held it tight. But we lose together, and we'll rebuild. Somewhere else, some other way. But we won't give you what you want. Not now. Not ever. Barrett looked at them for a long moment, this couple standing united on their porch, holding hands against the world. Something in his expression crumbled. I almost believe you, he said, quietly, that it's real, the way you look at each other. He turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope I'm wrong. I hope the judge sees what I see and throws my petition out. Because Margaret wouldn't have wanted this. Wouldn't have wanted me to become this. He climbed into his carriage and drove away, leaving Nora and Declan standing in the cold, trying to process what had just happened. Did he just, Nora started. I think so, Declan said. I think he just told us he's going to lose on purpose. But why? Declan pulled her close, pressed his lips to her temple. Because even bastards have consciences. Sometimes. But Samuel Barrett's conscience wasn't enough. The night before the hearing, Martha arrived with news that made Nora's blood run cold. The judge, she said without preamble, he's not going to throw it out. Barrett might have had a change of heart, but the judge sees this as a way to flex his power. He's planning to rule against you. Even with the ledger, Declan asked. The ledger proves Barrett's corrupt, not that your marriage is real. Martha sat heavily in a chair. We need something more, something that proves beyond doubt that this isn't a sham. Like what? Nora asked. What could possibly? Lily, Declan said suddenly. They both looked at him. She can testify. Tell the judge what she sees, what she feels. A child's testimony, it's innocent, uncoached. If she says we're a real family, that might be enough. No. Nora's voice was sharp. I won't put her through that. Won't make her stand up in front of strangers and defend us. Nora. No, she repeated. She's 6 years old. She's been through enough. I won't use her as a weapon even to save ourselves. Then what? Declan's voice rose in frustration. What do we do? Just walk into that courtroom and hope for mercy. If that's what it takes, then yes. They stared at each other, the tension crackling between them. Martha cleared her throat. There is one other option, she said quietly. They both turned to look at her. You could leave, Martha said. Tonight, before the hearing. Take Lily and go somewhere they can't find you. Canada, maybe, or Mexico. That's running, Nora said. That's surviving. Martha's voice was gentle. I know you want to fight. I know you want to prove them wrong. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is live to fight another day. Nora looked at Declan, saw the conflict written on his face. They'd promised not to run, but they'd also promised to protect each other, to protect Lily. What do you want to do? She asked him. I want to stay. I want to fight. I want to prove that we're real, that what we have matters. He took her hands. But more than that, I want you and Lily to be safe. And if running means keeping you safe, then we run. Nora felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so tired of being scared. Me too. He pulled her close and she buried her face in his chest. But we're scared together. That's what matters. They stood there holding each other while Martha watched with sad eyes and the clock on the mantel ticked toward tomorrow. They didn't run. In the end, it was Lily who made the choice for them. She crept out of bed, drawn by the sound of raised voices, and stood in the doorway listening to them debate their future. I'll testify, she said, her small voice cutting through the argument. They all turned to stare at her. Nora's heart clenched. Sweetheart, you don't have to. I want to. Lily walked into the room, her nightgown trailing behind her, her face set with a determination that was far too old for her years. Tommy said we're not a real family, that you're lying, but we are real. I know we are, and I can tell the judge that. Lily, please, Mama. The girl's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Let me help. Let me tell the truth. Nora looked at Declan, saw her own conflict mirrored in his face. Then she knelt down, brought herself to Lily's level. Are you sure it might be scary? There will be a lot of people, and they'll ask you questions. Will you be there? Yes. And Mr. Declan, I'll be right beside your mama, Declan said, his voice rough. Lily nodded, and then I'm sure. Martha wiped at her eyes. Brave girl, you're a brave, brave girl. And so the decision was made. They would stay, they would fight, and they would let a 6-year-old child speak the truth that adults had tried to complicate. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold. Nora dressed Lily in her best dress, the blue one with white flowers that had been mended at the hem. She braided her daughter's hair with trembling fingers, pressing kisses to the top of her head, whispering reassurances that she didn't quite believe herself. Declan wore the suit he'd been married in, and Nora noticed for the first time how it must have cost more than most people in Silver Creek made in a year. Evidence of the life he'd left behind, the wealth he'd walked away from. They rode to town in silence, Lily between them, Martha driving the wagon. The territorial courthouse was a modest building, but today it loomed large and imposing, its steps crowded with townspeople who'd come to watch the spectacle. Nora felt their eyes on her as they climbed down from the wagon, heard the whispers, the speculation. Marriage of convenience, fraud, shame. Declan took her hand, laced their fingers together. Head up, he murmured. We have nothing to be ashamed of. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. Samuel Barrett sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, his face carefully neutral. When he saw them enter, something flickered in his expression, regret maybe, or resignation. Judge Harrison sat at the bench, a portly man with mutton chops and a reputation for taking bribes. He looked at them with undisguised skepticism as they took their seats. This court is now in session, he announced. We're here to address a petition for annulment filed by Samuel Barrett against Declan Walsh and Nora Caldwell Walsh on grounds of fraud and misrepresentation. Barrett's lawyer stood. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like a knife. Your Honor, the facts of this case are straightforward. Mr. Walsh, whose real name is Declan Blackwell, son of the Boston industrialist Jonathan Blackwell, entered into marriage with Mrs. Caldwell under false pretenses. He used an assumed name, concealed his true identity, and married a woman in debt specifically to avoid financial liability being transferred. This is a clear case of fraud, and we ask that the marriage be annulled and criminal charges filed. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel. Order, Mr. Blackwell. Is it true you used an assumed name? Declan stood. It is, Your Honor. Walsh is my mother's maiden name. I took it when I left Boston. And why did you leave Boston? Because I didn't want to be the man my father expected me to be. Because I wanted to build a life on my own terms. By deceiving people about your identity, by seeking privacy, Your Honor, not deception. The lawyer pounced. And yet you married Mrs. Caldwell without revealing your true identity. Without telling her you came from wealth, that you had resources that could have paid her debts immediately. Instead, you let her believe you were a simple carpenter. Why? Declan was quiet for a moment. Because I wanted her to choose me for who I am, not what I have. Convenient, the lawyer said dryly. Your Honor, Bichet, hear testimony from several townspeople stating that this marriage appeared to be one of convenience from the start. That Mr. Blackwell and Mrs. Caldwell barely knew each other before wedding. That they maintained separate sleeping quarters. That there was no courtship, no romance, nothing to suggest genuine affection. That's not true, Lily's voice rang out from where she sat beside Martha. The judge looked startled. Young lady, you'll have your turn to speak if called. But they do love each other. Lily stood up, her small hands clenched into fists. I see it every day. The way Mama smiles when Mr. Declan comes in from working. The way he reads to me at night, even though he's tired. The way they hold hands when they think I'm not looking. That's real. That's what love looks like. The courtroom fell silent. Nora felt tears streaming down her face, and when she looked at Declan, she saw his eyes were bright too. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Caldwell, is it? Would you like to testify? Lily looked at Nora, who nodded through her tears. The girl walked to the witness stand, climbed up on the chair so she could be seen. The bailiff asked if she promised to tell the truth, and she said yes in a clear, strong voice. Tell me, the judge said, his voice gentler now. What makes you think your mother and Mr. Blackwell love each other? Lily thought for a moment. Because they're not sad anymore. When it was just me and Mama, she used to cry at night when she thought I was sleeping. And Mr. Declan, when he first came, his eyes looked empty, like part of him was missing. But now, she smiled, now they laugh together. And Mama doesn't cry. And Mr. Declan's eyes look full again, like he found the missing part. But they started this marriage as an arrangement, didn't they? To help your mother keep her land. Yes, Lily said honestly. But that's not why they stayed married. They stayed because they chose to, because they want to be a family, because her voice broke slightly. Because I asked Mr. Declan what he was if he wasn't my real papa, and he said he was someone who cared about us. And I think people who care about each other should get to be together even if it started different than other people's marriages. The judge was quiet for a long moment studying the child in front of him. Then he looked at Barrett. Mr. Barrett, this petition was filed by you. Do you have anything to add? Barrett stood slowly. The courtroom held its breath. I'd like to withdraw my petition, Your Honor. Gasps echoed through the room. Even the judge looked surprised. You wish to withdraw? Yes. Barrett's voice was steady. I've been watching them these past weeks. The way they look at each other. The way they built something real out of something that started as necessity. And I realize now that I've been trying to punish them for having what I lost. That's not justice, that's just cruelty dressed up in legal language. The judge leaned back in his chair, stroking his mutton chops. That's quite a reversal, Mr. Barrett. Yes, Your Honor, but it's the right one. I see. The judge was quiet for a moment, then he banged his gavel. In light of the plaintiff's withdrawal, this case is dismissed. The marriage between Declan Blackwell and Nora Caldwell Walsh stands. The courtroom erupted. Nora felt Declan's arms around her, felt Lily crash into both of them, felt the weight she'd been carrying for months finally lift. They'd won. They'd actually won. But as the crowd began to file out, the judge's voice stopped them. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwell, a word, please. They approached the bench warily. The judge looked at them over his glasses, his expression unreadable. I want you to know something, he said quietly. Barrett tried to bribe me, offered me enough money to clear my debts, and then some if I ruled in his favor. I was planning to take it. Nora's stomach dropped. Then why? Because I watched that little girl up there, and I saw the truth in her eyes. And I realized that if I ruled against you, I'd have to look at myself in the mirror every morning and remember the day I chose money over a child's happiness. He cleared his throat. Get out of here. Build your life. Be the family that girl thinks you are. They left the courthouse in a daze, surrounded by well-wishers and curious onlookers. Martha was crying openly, hugging Lillian, praising her courage. Samuel Barrett stood apart from the crowd, watching them with an expression that might have been wistfulness. Nora approached him. Thank you. He nodded. I meant what I said in there, about punishing you for having what I lost. It was wrong. What will you do now? Barrett smiled sadly. Maybe stop trying to replace what's gone and start building something new. There's a widow in the next county. Her name's Abigail. I've seen her at church. Maybe I'll ask her to dinner. Court her properly instead of trying to acquire her like property. I hope you do, Nora said sincerely. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even men like me, especially men like you. They celebrated that night at Martha's house. The old woman had prepared a feast that must have cost her a week's earnings. Roast chicken, fresh bread, apple pie. Lily ate until her stomach hurt and then fell asleep on the sofa, exhausted by the day's emotions. I have something to tell you, Martha said when the child was sleeping. Nora and Declan exchanged glances. What is it? Martha pulled out a familiar ledger, but this one was different from the one showing Barrett's illegal accounts. This one had Nora's name on it, and marked across the debt in bold letters was a single word, paid. What? Nora's hands shook as she took the ledger. How? I paid it off, Martha said simply. 3 months ago, went to the bank, cleared your debt in full. But that's $700. Martha, you don't have that kind of money. I did. Do. The old woman smiled. I've been saving for 50 years. Never had much use for it. No children to leave it to, no great ambitions. Just kept putting it away because that's what you do. And then I saw you struggling, saw you about to lose everything, and I thought, what's the point of saving for tomorrow if you can't help someone today? Nora felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. You mean all this time the debt wasn't even... You didn't owe the bank anything, not for 3 months now. Then why didn't you tell us? Declan asked. Because you needed to figure out what you were to each other without the debt hanging over you. If I told you right away, you might have ended the arrangement, gone your separate ways, thinking the crisis was over. But it wasn't really about the debt, was it? It was about 2 lonely people finding each other. And I wanted you to have the chance to discover that without obligation coloring everything. Nora laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and disbelief. So we've been fighting this whole time over nothing. Not nothing. Martha's voice was gentle. You've been fighting for each other, and that's everything. Nora looked at Declan, saw her own shock reflected in his face. Then she started laughing again, and he joined her, and soon they were both gasping, clutching each other, laughing at the absurdity of it all. We're idiots, Nora managed. Complete idiots, Declan agreed. But you're idiots who love each other, Martha said, pleased. And that's what matters. They rode home under a sky full of stars, Lily asleep between them. So, Declan said quietly, the debt's been paid. The marriage is legal. Barrett's backed off. We could... Don't, Nora interrupted. Don't what? Don't give me an out. Don't offer to leave now that the crisis is over. Don't pretend this was all just about survival. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I was actually going to say we could get married again. For real this time. The way we should have from the start. Nora's breath caught. What? We did it once for necessity. I'd like to do it again for love. He pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to face her. Nora Caldwell Walsh, will you marry me? Not because you have to, not because it's convenient, but because I love you. Because I want to spend the rest of my life making you laugh, protecting our daughter, building something real with you. Tears streamed down Nora's face. You really are terrible at pretending you know that. You were supposed to be a marriage of convenience, not the man I fell in love with. Is that a yes? That's a yes, you impossible man. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I love you. Yes to all of it. He kissed her, then deep and thorough, and Lily stirred between them, mumbling in her sleep. Are you kissing Tommy's mama says kissing means you're not sad anymore? They broke apart laughing. Yes, sweetheart, Nora said. We're not sad anymore. Good, Lily yawned. That's good. 2 weeks later, they held their real wedding in the farmhouse. It was small and simple, just Martha, a few neighbors who'd become friends, and the same circuit preacher who'd married them the first time. But everything about it was different. Nora wore a dress that Martha had helped her make cream-colored with blue flowers that matched Lily's. Declan wore his Boston suit, but he'd traded the expensive boots for the work-worn ones he'd been repairing fences in. A symbol maybe of the man he'd chosen to become. Lily was the flower girl and took her duties very seriously, scattering petals with solemn concentration. When the preacher asked who gave this woman to be married, Lily piped up, she gives herself, but I help. The guests laughed, and Nora felt her heart so full it might burst. The vows were simple. They promised to love, to honor, to stay. Not till death do us part, they'd both learned that death wasn't the only thing that could end a marriage, but till they chose differently. And they chose this. Every day they chose this. When the preacher said, you may kiss the bride, Declan cupped Nora's face in his hands and kissed her like he meant it, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. And when they broke apart, Lily cheered, and Martha cried, and someone started playing a fiddle. They danced in the farmhouse, pushing back the furniture to make room. Declan spun Lily until she was dizzy with giggles, then pulled Nora close and swayed with her. To the music. Happy, he murmured against her hair. Happier than I have any right to be. Good. Because I'm planning on spending the rest of our lives making you even happier. That's a tall order. I've got time, he smiled, and I'm not going anywhere. That night, after the guests had gone and Lily was asleep, Nora and Declan sat on the porch watching the stars. I got a letter back from Eleanor, Declan said quietly. Nora turned to him, and she's coming to visit. In the spring when the roads are passable. She wants to meet you. And Lily. Are you nervous? Terrified, he laughed. But in a good way, I think. It's been 3 years since I've seen her. I don't know if we'll even recognize each other. You'll recognize her, Nora said with certainty. Love doesn't forget. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, crickets and wind, and the distant call of an owl. Nora thought about how far they'd come, from desperate strangers making a bargain to this, a real marriage, a real family, a real life. What are you thinking? Declan asked. That I'm glad the debt brought you to me. Even though it turns out we didn't actually need saving, at least not from that. What did we need saving from? Ourselves, our fear, our belief that we didn't deserve happiness. She took his hand. Thank you for being brave enough to stay. Thank you for being brave enough to let me. They went inside, checked on Lily one last time, then retreated to their bedroom. The pallet was long gone. Declan had built them a larger bed, sturdy and beautiful, made from wood he had harvested himself. They climbed in together and Nora settled into the curve of his body, his arm around her waist. "Nora," he said into the darkness. I'm home. For the first time in years, I'm home." She turned in his arms, kissed him softly. "Me too." Spring came to Silver Creek with a vengeance. The snow melted, turning the roads to mud, and the world burst into green and gold. Wildflowers carpeted the meadow behind the farmhouse, and Lily spent hours picking them, weaving them into crowns and necklaces. Declan expanded the barn, built a workshop where he could take on carpentry projects for neighbors. Word spread about his skill, and soon he had more work than he could handle. Nora started keeping the books, managing the business side while he worked the wood. They were building something, not just a marriage or a farm, but a life. Tommy Crawford came by one afternoon with his father. The boy's face was red with shame as he approached where Lily was playing. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, "for hitting you, for saying mean things." Lily looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, do you want to play?" Just like that, it was forgiven. The simplicity of children, Nora thought. Would that adults could do the same? James Crawford hung back, talking to Declan. "Heard you're not planning to leave." "No, this is home now." Crawford nodded slowly. "Good, we need more good men in Silver Creek, men who keep their word." It was as close to an apology as they were likely to get, and Declan accepted it with grace. Martha's health began to decline as spring turned to summer. It was subtle at first, a slower step, a more frequent need to sit and rest. But Nora saw it, recognized the signs. The old woman had given everything to help them, and now she was paying the price. They insisted she move into the farmhouse. Martha protested, but not very hard, and soon she had taken over Lily's old room. Lily moved in with Nora and Declan, creating a little nest in the corner, and declared it an adventure. "You don't have to do this," Martha said one evening, sitting on the porch with Nora, while Declan and Lily chased fireflies in the meadow. "Yes, we do. You saved us. Now it's our turn." "I didn't save you to create an obligation." "It's not an obligation." Nora took her hand. "It's love. That's what families do. They take care of each other." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "I never had a family. Not really. No children, no husband who lasted. I thought I'd die alone." "Well, you thought wrong. You're stuck with us now." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Declan catch Lily and spin her around, her laughter floating on the evening air. "You did good," Martha said quietly. "Both of you. You built something real." "We had help. From a meddling old woman who couldn't mind her own business." Nora laughed. "From an angel who saw what we needed before we knew ourselves." Martha squeezed her hand. "I'm glad I lived long enough to see this, to see you happy. You're not going anywhere. Maybe not today, but soon." Martha's voice was calm, accepting. "And when I do, I'll go knowing I helped create something that will last. That's enough for anyone." Eleanor Blackwell arrived on a warm day in June. Nora was hanging laundry when she saw the carriage approaching, finer than anything they usually saw in Silver Creek. Her heart began to pound. This was Declan's sister, his past catching up to his present. Declan emerged from the barn, saw the carriage, and went very still. Then he was moving, walking fast, then running. The carriage stopped, and a woman stepped out, tall, dark-haired, with Declan's blue eyes. "Dec," she said, and then they were in each other's arms, both of them crying. Nora hung back, giving them space. This was their moment, years in the making. Finally, Eleanor pulled back, cupped his face in her hands. "Let me look at you. You're thinner, and you've got gray hair. You're one to talk. When did you start wearing spectacles?" "When reading medical texts by candlelight damaged my eyes." She smiled. "I'm a doctor now. Not official, not licensed, but I apprenticed with a physician in Boston. Turns out father's objections died down once you left, and he had no one else to focus his ambitions on." "Eleanor, I don't blame you for leaving. I never did. I'm just glad you finally told me where you landed." She looked past him to where Nora stood. "Is that her, your Nora?" "Yeah." He held out his hand, and Nora came forward, suddenly self-conscious, in her simple dress and work-roughened hands. "Nora, this is my sister Eleanor. Eleanor, my wife Nora." Eleanor took both of Nora's hands in hers, studied her face. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For giving my brother back to me. For making him stop running." Eleanor smiled. "And for loving him when he didn't think he deserved it." Before Nora could respond, Lily came barreling out of the house. "Is that the aunt, the one from the letter?" "That's me," Eleanor said, kneeling down to Lily's level. "And you must be Lily. I've heard so much about you." "Did you really almost die in a fire?" "Lily!" Nora gasped, but Eleanor laughed. "I did. It was very dramatic. But I got better. And then my foolish brother spent 3 years thinking he'd killed me when really I was just fine. That is foolish, Lily agreed seriously. You should check on people before deciding they're dead. Wise advice. Eleanor stood and Declan pulled her close again, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. How long can you stay? He asked. 2 weeks. I brought my medical bag, thought I could help out in town, see if anyone needs a doctor, and get to know your family properly. Our family, Declan corrected. You're part of it now, too. The 2 weeks Eleanor spent with them were a revelation. She fit into their life with surprising ease, helping Nora with chores, playing endless games with Lily, sitting up late with Declan talking about their childhood. She set up a temporary clinic in town and saw a steady stream of patients, impressing everyone with her knowledge and skill. You should stay, Martha said one evening. Silver Creek could use a doctor. Eleanor smiled. I have obligations in Boston. Father's getting old, and despite everything, he's still family. But I'll visit often. And when he passes, she looked at Declan. Maybe then I'll come back for good. One night after Lily was asleep and Martha had retired to her room, the three of them sat on the porch. Eleanor had brought brandy from Boston, and they passed the bottle around talking and laughing. I'm proud of you, Eleanor said to Declan, for building this, for choosing it. I'm sorry I left you alone with a father. Oh, he's not so bad once you learn to manage him. And honestly, without you there to be his perfect heir, he had to accept me as I am. It's been freeing in a way. Still, I could have written sooner. Yes, you could have. And I could have tried harder to find you. She smiled. But we're here now. That's what matters. Declan looked at Nora, reached for her hand. I used to think love meant obligation, that it was a cage, but it's not. It's just choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Beautifully said, Eleanor murmured, though I notice you're still terrible at emotions. He threw a piece of bread at her, and she caught it laughing. Nora watched them, these siblings who'd found their way back to each other, and felt grateful beyond measure. Her family had just gotten bigger. Martha died on a quiet morning in August. She simply didn't wake up. Nora found her peaceful in her bed, a slight smile on her face, like she was dreaming of something pleasant. They buried her on the hill overlooking the farm under a tree she'd always loved. The whole town came to the funeral. Samuel Barrett stood at the back, and when it was over, he approached Nora with tears in his eyes. She was a good woman, better than most of us deserved. Yes, Nora agreed. She was. She saved me too, you know. In her way, made me see what I was becoming. He cleared his throat. I've been courting Abigail, the widow I mentioned. She said yes. To dinner, to walks, to... He smiled slightly. To taking things slow. Building something real instead of trying to capture what's gone. I'm happy for you, Samuel. Truly. Thank you for not hating me, for... He gestured vaguely, for showing me a different way. After he left, Declan wrapped his arm around Nora's shoulders. Lily leaned against them both, quiet and sad. They stood together on the hill, looking down at the farm that Martha had helped them keep. She gave us so much, Nora said. Yeah, Declan's voice was rough. She gave us each other. 1 year after their real wedding, Nora woke to find Declan already awake watching her. What? She asked, smiling. Just thinking about how lucky I am, how different my life is from what I thought it would be. Better or worse? So much better, it's not even a comparison. He kissed her forehead. I have a family, a home, a purpose beyond just surviving. I have you. We have each other, she corrected. From the corner of the room, Lily stirred. At 7, she was getting too old to sleep in their room, but she liked it, and neither Nora nor Declan had the heart to make her leave. Are you being sappy again? Lily asked sleepily. Maybe, Declan admitted. Good. Tommy's new papa is never sappy. Tommy says it's boring. How is Tommy? Nora asked. The boy and his father had both changed significantly in the past year. James Crawford had remarried a kind woman who'd softened both him and his son. He's okay. He wants to learn carpentry. I told him to ask you, Mr. Declan. Did you now? Yes, because you're good at teaching people things. You taught me how to not be scared. You could teach him how to make stuff from wood. Declan looked at Nora, something soft and wondering in his expression. You're not scared anymore. Not as much, Lily said seriously, because I know even when scary things happen, we'll be together. That's what families do. Yeah, Declan said quietly. That's what families do. They got up, started their day, made breakfast together, fed the animals, worked on their respective projects. It was ordinary, mundane, utterly perfect. In the evening, they sat on the porch, their spot, now the place where they'd had so many important conversations. The sun was setting, painting the sky in golds and pinks. Eleanor's coming back next month, Declan said. She's thinking about opening a permanent practice here. Father's health is failing, and she says, he paused. She says he asked her to tell me he's proud, that he understands why I left, that he wishes he'd been the kind of father who could have let me choose my own path. Are you going to go see him? Maybe, someday, when I'm ready. He pulled Nora closer. But not yet. Right now I'm exactly where I want to be. Me too. Lily ran out to join them, squeezing between them on the porch swing. They sat together, the three of them, watching the sun go down on another day in their imperfect, beautiful life. Mama, Lily said. Yes, sweetheart. Do you think Martha can see us from heaven? Nora felt tears prick her eyes. I think so. Good. Lily leaned her head against Nora's shoulder. I want her to know we're happy, that her plan worked. What plan? Declan asked. The one where she made you fall in love, even though you were pretending not to. Nora and Declan looked at each other over Lily's head and both smiled. You're too smart for your own good, Nora told her daughter. I know, Lily said contentedly. It's genetic. Later that night, when Lily was finally asleep and they lay in their bed, Declan pulled Nora close. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Agreeing to marry a stranger, taking that risk? Never, Nora said without hesitation. Not for a second. He kissed her hair. Though I regret wasting time pretending it was just an arrangement. We could have had this sooner. Maybe? Or maybe we needed that time to learn to trust, to be sure. Are you sure now? She turned in his arms, looked up at his face in the moonlight streaming through the window. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You're mine, Declan Blackwell. Mine and Lily's. And we're yours. That's not an arrangement. That's not convenience. That's just us. Our family. Our family, he repeated like the words were a prayer. God, I love the sound of that. Good, because you're stuck with us now. Best trap I ever walked into. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, safe and warm and home. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. The land that had once been a burden, a source of debt and shame, was now simply theirs. A place they'd chosen, a place they'd fought for, a place they'd built into something worth keeping. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And in the end, that made all the difference.